Okay, is everybody in here?
All right, so this is a discussion on the Hans Rosling video about HIV prevalence throughout the world. One of the things I found interesting is that it varies. HIV prevalence varies a lot, even within the same country. So, like in Africa, there's a lot of the southern parts that were really high in HIV prevalence, but like Madagascar was low, just like the United States. I also liked how he showed that within um, the certain countries in Africa that he broke it apart and showed that the more wealthy people within that country were actually the ones that were most infected with HIV instead of the poor. So it was kind of a mind blown because it shows that it's not just the poor people who are being infected with it, but also mainly the people who aren't rich but are doing better within that country.
Yeah, just going off what Joe said, I like that he said we shouldn't assume just because countries are poor, the prevalence of HIV is going to be higher. That it varies. I also like that he said that most the decisions and the prevalence of HIV have to do a lot with money and the heart and the brain and the way that people behave, um, which was interesting. Um, I guess like also when we discussed in class, he said, Brother Maker said that it's the prevalence of HIV would be a lot smaller here at BYU Idaho because of we don't believe in sexual intimacy before marriage, and that the increase in HIV has to do a lot with people that have multiple partners and just make decisions in a rush. And I thought it was interesting that usually people that have a lot of money don't make wise decisions. But I think it has to do a lot with their moral standards. They don't care much so much because they already have everything.
Agreed. They talked about on there from Botswana, I'm not sure if I said that right, but the good economy there and how the rate fluctuated there, but it was also coming down slowly because the people there were actually being treated for HIV, and so it showed it on a rise quite high, but then it came down slowly because they're actually being treated. And then it also showed that it was falling faster in Zimbabwe because people there, basically, they have HIV and they were dying. And so that's where the statistic changed there, is because they weren't being treated and they would actually die from HIV. And then it also talked about in different populations of Africa and different places in Kenya or Zimbabwe, the difference there is they wondered why the percentages were so different in one place. And again, it's because of the way people choose to live and the way people choose to be. It doesn't always make a difference if there's a treatment there or if they have HIV. It's what they're doing about it in that particular city within that country, and how they're basically going about being better about it, being treated, and how they're choosing their sexual partners. And I think it also goes back to the way that they're educated and cultural beliefs as well.
I just really liked the chart that he had set up, how he talked about the percentage of infected adults and then compared that to how wealthy they were, like the dollars per person, and that the bubble increased with the prevalence of HIV. So it really, you could compare and how he organized it by continent too, I believe. And so just Africa was definitely one of the higher rated areas, and how it was interesting. I can't remember the statistic he exactly gave, but it's like one of the smallest areas with the most that has 50% of HIV infected persons. So just how incredible that number is for them. But he did talk about how right now the movement is stopping transmission, and so the focus is on prevention. They're starting to research how to stop the transmission and trying to educate people. He even said, like, well, we don't have a vaccine for it yet, but maybe that could be in the future. And so just I think these rates will continue to go down as people are educated about it. And
So maybe one last thought. Do you think that people within those countries, maybe the poorer people aren't the ones spreading it as much because they don't have the same access to different cultures and different people within that area, and maybe the more wealthy people are able to present themselves better, more I guess more clean looking, but maybe they're more desirable because they have that money, and maybe that's why it spreads. Or what do you think?
Well, kind of remember how he was talking about, was it the vodka in Sweden?
Yeah.
Or something, just so maybe the wealthy are able to afford more stuff like that and tend to party and socialize more than those who are just mainly trying to feed themselves and their families.
I also think it has to do with prostitution too, because I am sure that in these countries, the wealthy, whether they're paying for prostitution or just taking it because they feel like they have a right to it, definitely has a factor on that. Because, like she said, some of them have a different partner every day, and so that is why the percentage does go up. It would make a big difference in the way that plays in, I would think too. And plus, if you have money, I think different culturally too, people think that you have more power, and I think that the women would be more inferior to them too, and feel maybe like they owe it to them and scared to say no.
And I find it interesting that in Tanzania, the percentage of people with HIV is bigger in women than it is in men. And I think it also has to do with as a woman, you're more exposed to it because, I mean, if you're married and you have your husband, but if you don't know your husband's cheating or he's doing something else, I guess you really don't know. So it's kind of hard.
You'd be susceptible to it both ways.
Well, that and women who get it, they're giving birth to children, and there's a small chance that they could be passing it on in birth as well.
And transaction it that way.
Amen.
Does anybody have how many minutes?
Yeah, we're definitely.